Je vous demande d'accueillir sans plus attendre un gourou du changement. Please welcome Robert Tercek, President Founder of General Creativity. Robert.
Hello, I'm Robert Tercek. You can find me on Twitter at Superplex. Je suis désolé, mais je ne parle pas français, and that's why I'm going to be speaking English to you today. I'm going to talk to you about the magic of digital marketing as we start to transform this world and redefine it in software. Let's see here. This is not working. Oh, of course, great, thank you. The information economy is changing the world. It's reshaping it, and you know this. Every person in this room is familiar with this process because you're doing it as digital marketers. You're starting to change the way people deal with products and services and their customers. But even though you're familiar with it, there are still many, many surprises. Just 2 weeks ago, Volkswagen revealed to us a terrible, terrible secret. It's not just that they lied to regulators around the world about their cars. It's not just that they lied to their customers and shareholders and demolished their brand value. Those are bad things. But they also built software that was designed to lie. The software was designed to deceive. They're teaching machines to lie to us. This is an extraordinary breach of contract, and it will damage their brand in the digital environment forever. But paradoxically, this mistake is also going to accelerate another trend. It's going to accelerate a trend driving alternatives to traditional vehicles. Self-driving cars now got an enormous boost from this disastrous marketing move by Volkswagen. And we're starting to see now every major auto company around the world unveiling their plans for autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles. So an idea that was just a radical concept a few years ago is now quickly moving into the mainstream. The car companies have no choice. They have to make investments in this arena. Toyota just announced that they hired the head of the robotics program from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Program in the United States. And they're spending $50 million to advance the field of artificial intelligence and robotic vehicles. They have no choice because Google and Apple are already in this space and they're putting enormous pressure on them. The computer companies look at this as an opportunity to deploy artificial intelligence at scale in one of the most interesting applications of artificial intelligence. As vehicles move through the environment, they're going to start to capture data. This will be a place to apply machine intelligence, machine vision, cloud computing, cloud robotics, and so on. So the car is really an advanced application of robotics and computing processing power. It won't be limited to vehicles like automobiles. Of course, transportation, logistics, the shipping of goods, logistics centers will all start to become robotized as well. And in fact, already today, the leading providers of robot vehicles, they're not selling them to the streets, they're not selling them in the trucking companies, they're selling them to farms. John Deere is the leading provider today of autonomous vehicles in the United States. And so we're starting to see this idea go from a totally tangential, maybe visionary concept to practical reality in a very short period of time. But the strange thing about this idea of adding software to every device on the road, is how few of us understand how these systems actually work. And that's a real vulnerability for our culture. Previously, in the last century, the century of mechanical goods, it was quite easy for someone who wanted to learn how things work. You could simply take them apart and learn to put them back together again. But today, our electric vehicles are almost like gigantic computers. In fact, they have 100 computing systems or more. So this Tesla has so many automated systems on it that I could never take it apart and fix it. I wouldn't know how to manage those parts. I don't know the software that drives them. And so it's a black box. It's impenetrable to me. I don't have access to those systems. And increasingly, our car manufacturers like this. They can actually start to download software to the car so they can remotely upgrade the car's features and functionality over the air. In fact, the way Silicon Valley looks at the car, it's not so much a transportation device, but rather it's a big rolling smartphone on the street. And that plays very well to the strengths of Apple and Google. And it's good for us to think about the smartphone because no device in our lifetime has so transformed our lives and yet done it in a way where we really don't understand how these things work. We can blame Steve Jobs for this because he told us, don't worry about it. It just works. That's all you need to know. It just works. And most of us have been conditioned to accept this thing. We carry these phones in our pockets, but we have no idea how a mobile phone works, how downloading works, how the software inside of the phone works. We don't really own the phone. We own the hardware, but we don't own the software. And if we violate the terms of use on the software, we can't actually use the phone anymore. It has no value to us. So even the concept of ownership has changed. I'll show you what I mean by this. If you do a search on Google for images of smartphones, you find images that look like this. This is an artist's depiction of a smartphone. And you can see that there are many, many pictures. You'll find thousands of photos like this. They're all the same, these images. They show these little tiny colorful icons floating magically above the screen. And the photos are all the same. The images are all the same. They're at a slightly different angle. Sometimes the icons themselves change a little bit, but it's the same concept over and over. If someone new were to come to this place who didn't know about smartphones and they saw these pictures, they would think that every smartphone had a little cloud of colorful chiclets floating in front of it all the time. This shows you that the artists who made these images actually have no idea how a smartphone works or how downloading over the air actually works. We simply have no concept of it. Any technology that is sufficiently advanced feels like magic to us because we don't understand how it works. That leaves us vulnerable to companies like Volkswagen who manipulate that software. And it leaves us vulnerable to companies that are trying to steal our identities, track us without our permission, use our data without our permission. And so people are starting to develop a sense of wariness about these things. We use them, we rely on them, but our use of them is more like a conditional permission, which we might revoke at some future point. For marketers, it's very important to understand that your role has changed in digital because you're in the magic business. That's quite simply a function of the fact that we're spending more and more time in digital platforms. In this hybrid economy where we're combining software together with real products, software is going to increase in importance. It's going to become the most important channel for connecting with people, for finding customers, for keeping customers. And so every company will become a software company. All marketing eventually will become digital marketing. That's a fact, because we now spend about 10 of our waking hours staring into digital screens. That's a real challenge for marketers because you're trying to sell something that people can't see, they can't touch it, they have no way to access it, they don't really understand how it works. These are marketing challenges. They're also great opportunities. I think in a way you might describe your marketing department differently. You might change the name of it from marketing department to the Department of Magic. I don't mean Harry Potter style magic. I don't mean this stuff with wizards and warlocks and magic wands and flying brooms. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about stagecraft, the art of presenting these magical concepts to people, prestidigitation, the art of illusion, deciding what you show and what you make disappear. That's increasingly going to be a function of marketing. 100 years ago, great magicians stood on stages like this and they made things disappear. They created magical illusions for audiences. Houdini made an entire elephant disappear. Well, today, marketing departments are doing this on a heroic scale. We're dematerializing things. We're doing it very, very swiftly. Dematerialization on an industrial scale, we're making many things vanish. It's the world's greatest vanishing act, and it's happening right now. I call it vaporized, and I wrote a book about this topic because it's such a fascinating change for our society. We've vaporized so many things. We've vaporized books. Amazon now sells more ebook downloads than they sell hardback and paperback book combined. CD sales have been surpassed by streaming services. We've vaporized the music business. We're vaporizing the games business. Mobile games have completely transformed the economics of the game business, and thereby they've changed the design of mobile games and regular games as well. So the process of vaporizing is where we replace physical things with information, with invisible information that can be downloaded at the touch of an icon onto a smartphone. It changes us, the consumer, and it changes the kinds of products we have and how we interact with them. For instance, consider this map. Until very recently, if you traveled, you had to buy a map to find out where you were to get there. Of course, today, nobody does this because we already have a great map in our phone. And if you don't like the map app that came with your iPhone, you can delete it and replace it with a better one. And it's probably going to be free. And of course, the new maps are way better than the old maps. The new maps, the new digital maps, know exactly where you are. They know all the things around you. They can show you where to get to your next place. They can give you instant directions. You're never lost. An entire generation is growing up with these maps, and they will never experience what it means to be lost in a foreign city. It simply won't happen to them because the phone will tell them where they are. That's not all. The phone knows your preferences. And increasingly, it can start to predict what you'd like, and it can start to make recommendations. Apps like Google Now on tap will give us automatic recommendations when we search for something, and they'll show us where to find it on the map. So that's changing our perception of what's available to us. In a way, it's like giving people superpower. Anybody, an average person armed with a smartphone, can instantly become the most informed, most knowledgeable person. They can find anything they want, and they can summon it on demand. There are 1.3 million apps in the App Store. That's 1.3 million things that used to be sold as physical products on store shelves. And we simply don't need to go to the store for them anymore. We simply don't purchase them in physical form. We can download them instantly. And we're adding more than 1,000 new apps a day to that store. 40,000 apps a month are added to the iTunes store. And of course, it's not just media that we're vaporizing. We're not just vaporizing maps and music and books. We're also vaporizing hardware. We're turning it into information. We're replacing hardware, physical goods, with information. 12 years ago, this BlackBerry pager was considered a smartphone because it took 4 different things and combined it into a single device. By 2010, just 8 years later, a standard smartphone from Samsung, a cheap smartphone from Samsung, had more than 25 consumer electronics devices included in it. It had absorbed the functionality of 25 different devices. And the companies that made those devices saw their business plummet. They saw their sales plummet. And the process continues today. So this year, we're starting to see the mobile phone take over the credit card, payment systems, everything in your wallet, your identity card, access card, your keys. I checked into a hotel in San Francisco just a couple weeks ago, and this is the card they gave me, the key card. It says, "My days as a key are numbered." They're encouraging me to sign up for the app. They want me to sign up for the SPG app because in the future they would like to pair my phone when I check in. And then when I go to my room, I simply have to tap the phone. Just like Apple Pay, I'll use the phone to open the door to my room. Once I do that, that will give that hotel chain an opportunity to customize the entire interior of that room for my preferences, so that all the electronics in that room will instantly recognize me. They can pull my media down from the cloud. They can turn that into my room. And that'll develop tremendous customer loyalty. That'll be a great way for me to start to build more relationship with that company. Whatever can be turned into information will be. Whatever part of your business, whether it's information embedded in a product, information inside of your business process, information in your marketing and communications, or information in your employees' heads. Whatever information can be unlocked and turned into digital software, it will be, whether companies choose to do this themselves or they wait for some other company to do it for them. And this process is now extending outside of the mobile world, outside of the internet, into the real world around us. And the best example of that, of course, is in retail. Retail is going through a total transformation as we install beacons. Across the United States now, hundreds of retail shops are installing beacons. For the consumer, it's great. If you get the app, you can pair your app with that store beacon. It will tell you where you are in the store. It'll make special offers for you. There'll be a loyalty program attached to it. But of course, for the retailer, it will help them harvest data from their best customers and know where they shop, how frequently they shop. It's like web analytics inside of a retail environment. That can work great. If they do it well, it'll feel like that Disney Magic Band. You know, the Disney Magic Band, it sounds a little bit Orwellian. You've heard about it, of course. This is a Wi-Fi band that people wear when they go to the Disney theme park. It sounds creepy until you go. Every person I know who's gone to Disneyland and used that loves it because it personalizes the theme park. It makes the theme park responsive to you in a way that previously the theme park was faceless and you never really got to interact with it on that level. I think that's going to happen to retail in the future. Smart retailers will find a way to do this. But of course, for those people who don't want to deal with a store, don't want to go to a store, well, there's an app for that as well. You can use Postmates or Instacart, and then someone else will fetch whatever it is that you want. And let's suppose you don't want to use Postmate, or you don't want to use Instacart. Well, there's an app for that as well. We're actually vaporizing the apps. The newest generation of apps are invisible apps. There's no app involved. With this app, you simply send a text message of whatever it is that you want, and the company will deal with Postmates or Instacart. They'll fetch it for you, but you don't even have to use those apps. And of course, this service is called magic. If you do it right, it is like magic. It'll transform the world into a place that's personalized and responsive, that anticipates your needs. But if you do it wrong, it's evil voodoo. And of course, this is where I get to talk about Uber. Uber is amazing. I'm a great customer. I'm a loyal customer. I use Uber whenever I travel. I travel all over the world. It's an incredibly good execution. The app itself is about it's one of the best apps I've ever used. It's also an incredible value as a traveler. You don't have to deal with money. You don't have to deal with language. You don't have to deal with directions. You just jump in the car, and when you're done, you leave. No money changes hands. It's a great service. But everybody hates Uber. It's the most disliked company in the world. It's astonishing. Everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter whether you're in India or China, Hong Kong, here in Paris. People are attacking Uber drivers. They're burning Uber cars. They're protesting in the streets. Of course, taxi drivers don't like it because it's competition. Of course, taxi owners don't like it because it's competition. But also passengers object to it as well. They feel like Uber doesn't obey the law, doesn't play fair, doesn't observe the regulations, isn't registered and regulated the same way that traditional taxi drivers are, and people don't like that. So what's really happening, I think, with Uber is that Uber's trying to take principles of how you do business on the internet, and they're applying them into the real world. They're trying to make the real world conform to digital rules. They're trying to make the real world operate the way the internet operates. And there's a great deal of friction there because not everybody's ready for a world that's driven by software. So there's a great deal of friction. Here's a great example. Even the most loyal Uber customer hates surge pricing. This is their dynamic pricing system. This is when there's tremendous demand for Uber cars, there aren't enough cars available. So Uber raises the price until more drivers show up. That's their way of matching demand. It's simple supply and demand. And every internet e-commerce site uses dynamic pricing of some sort or another. This is commonplace on the web, but it's unknown to us in the real world. It's very strange, and people find it disconcerting. They don't like it. Uber's also using software to replace rules and regulations. Uber believes that user reviews and ratings are a more powerful way to regulate behavior than some laws and some inspectors that come and check up on taxi drivers. And if you've ever experienced taxi drivers and then taken an Uber ride shortly afterwards, you can see the difference. The Uber drivers are very courteous. Here in Paris, the Uber drivers are incredibly friendly. They come around, they open the door, they offer you water, they carry your bags. When you have a taxi cab, you just don't have that same experience. And so Uber feels that the best regulator is the customer using a ratings type application. They can rank and review the driver. And it works. If a driver's rating goes below 4 points, they get fired. They don't get to drive anymore. This is a principle from the web. And on the internet, clearly, people don't trust banner ads. They don't trust a lot of the internet advertising, but they do trust other users. They trust other users' reviews. So again, Uber's taking a principle from the web, and they're trying to apply that to the real world. It's a fascinating experiment. We'll see how well it works. But it doesn't stop there. Uber's also using software as a substitute for management. You see, Uber hasn't vaporized the car. They haven't vaporized the driver yet. But they have vaporized the dispatcher, the person who assigns the driver. That's done by an application. That's done by a task management application that assigns drivers their next assignment. So whenever I drive with Uber, I ask the drivers how they like it, and they tell me, oh, I love it. I'm an independent businessman. I get to set my own hours. I'm in charge of my business. I say, that's great. That's really cool. Who tells you what to do? And they say, I don't have a boss. I'm an independent businessman. And I say, well, how do you find out about the passengers? Who tells you what passenger to pick up? And they say, oh, the app does that. I say, well, then you're working for an app. Your boss is an app. And they don't like that too much, but that's the fact of the matter. If you have a job where your boss is an app, then you're probably a biological robot. Uber can best be thought of as a kind of hybrid, a machine, a human driver, and software that tells the driver what to do. But make no mistake about it, the management is software. Now, if you think that's strange, that's just the beginning. Because Uber's not done yet, and this trend is going to continue, and there's other competition coming after Uber. So things are about to get very strange in this world that's being redefined by software. For instance, software as a substitute for labor is clearly something that's coming very, very soon. We know that Google has already developed robot cars that are on the road in California and 3 other US states. And we also know that taxi services are starting to roll out, for instance, in Japan. So driverless cars, driverless taxi service are going to be a reality in the next 5 years in most countries. It's a very strange concept. But for drivers, for taxi drivers, it's a career-threatening prospect, and you're going to see a tremendous amount of pushback against this notion of technological unemployment. Guaranteed, this will be one of the most divisive political issues of the next 5 years, maybe longer. If you thought the reaction yesterday to Air France and their layoff was bad, wait till you see robot vehicles hit the streets of France. You're going to see protests like you've never seen in this country. And I know, protest is a political sport in this country. It gets even weirder. In the United States, our Supreme Court has told us that corporations are people. Nobody asked them that question, but they made a ruling that told us that corporations are people. And it's quite clear that every robot car, every robot taxi, will be a separate corporation. It'll be a separate company. They'll do that for liability reasons, for insurance purposes, and so you'll have a lot of robot cars. They'll all be small corporations. If the robot car is a corporation and corporations are people, then robots are people. And we'll now see a whole new political battle arise about the rights of robots. And if you don't think that's happening, in fact, the discussion's already occurring. In the last 4 months, we've seen a series of attacks on robots. Robots in the United States and Japan have been attacked by people who didn't like them, who thought they were strange, who wanted to mess around with them, drunken people hitting them, little children ganging up on a robot as a team. And in the United States, someone decapitated a robot. They cut the head off of the thing. So we're starting to see pushback against robots. It won't be long before we see robots' rights as well, particularly when they become corporations. And ultimately, software in the form of a robot corporation will replace entire companies. That may sound like a crazy notion, but it's quite a popular notion in the Bitcoin community. A distributed or decentralized autonomous corporation. The principle is quite simple. If you have a robot vehicle, which is a robot worker, and you have a robot task management software that's managing them, then why do you need people in the company at all? Why not just write a profit maximization algorithm that runs the entire corporation, and the corporation can live in the cloud? It doesn't even need a physical presence. A software-driven corporation. There are several companies that are trying to develop this right now. Ethereum in Canada is one of them, but they have several competitors. And that leads me to believe that we'll start to see progress by the end of this decade on robot corporations that live in the cloud. And they'll all be using the blockchain protocol to ensure trust in those transactions, to manage those transactions. So we're moving into a world where science fiction is becoming the new normal. Our world is changing so quickly because we're redefining it with software. And for marketers, that means there are going to be some gigantic challenges. The biggest one you'll have to face is this trust gap. Consumers aren't sure if they trust this. They don't understand how these systems work. They don't like being lied to, whether it's from Volkswagen or some internet marketing company. They resist that. They understand it. They resent it. They will be very difficult to reach. That's going to be your principal challenge. You're going to have to teach people to trust software, teach them to trust the algorithms that are redefining their experience. That means when you do a brand audit in the future, you will be less focused on brand interaction, and you'll probably be more focused on brands in action. And by that I mean you're going to compare what the company says to what the company actually does. And you're going to see if those two things match. And if they don't, your marketing efforts will be forcing them to bring those things into alignment, to match deeds and actions. So those are my thoughts for today. I believe there's a huge and great opportunity ahead for us, for marketers, because we're redefining this world. If you'd like to learn more about it, please do check out my book, Vaporized, which is available as a digital download on Amazon. Thank you.